you, my colleagues, to weigh in on the side of that the American people have a right to know what the plain language of the statute actually means after being interpreted by a court. Thank you. And, Mr. President, I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Falcone. We see there on the screen a tweet from Minority Leader McConnell's office saying that with the deadline looms, Congress awaits President's proposal for avoiding fiscal cliff. GOP Leader McConnell on the Senate floor said earlier that Republicans are not about to write a blank check for anything the Senate Democrats put forward just because we find ourselves at the edge of the fiscal cliff. He goes on to say that it's not fair to the American people. And that said, we'll see what the president has to propose, and members on both sides of the aisle will review it. And a tweet just a short while ago from a CNN reporter says that our Ted Barrett on Capitol Hill reports that Senator Harry Reid just walked into Senator Mitch McConnell's office.
No one disputes.
Senator McConnell called today for the House to return to Washington.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection.
Mr. President, no one disputes the vital importance of our national security. Indeed, in Federalist 41, James Madison noted that security against foreign danger is one of the primitive objects of civil society. And he emphasized that such security is an avowed and essential object of the American Union. Government officials have a solemn duty, particularly in the age of global terrorism, to help ensure that the American people are safe and secure. Yet at the same time, government also exists to do a lot more than just promote security. Its most fundamental purpose is to protect our natural and inalienable liberties. Safeguarding individual rights and liberties is the bedrock of American government. In the words of our nation's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, it is to secure these rights that governments are instituted among men. In our quest for ever greater security, we must be mindful not to sacrifice the very rights and liberties that make our safety valuable. As Benjamin Franklin put it, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. I worry that in seeking to achieve temporary safety, some of the authorities we have given the government under FISA may compromise essential rights and liberties. In particular, I'm concerned about the government's ability, without a warrant, to search through FISA materials for communications involving individual American citizens. I worry that this authority is inconsistent with and diminishes the essential constitutional right that each of us has to be secure against unreasonable searches and seizures. We don't know the precise number of communications involving American citizens that the government collects, stores, and analyzes under Section 702 of FISA. Whether this number is large or small, I believe we must enforce meaningful protections for circumstances when the government searches through its database of captured communications looking for information on individual American citizens. Otherwise, by means of these so-called backdoor searches, the government may conduct significant warrantless surveillance of American persons. I believe this current practice is inconsistent with core Fourth Amendment privacy protections and needs to be reformed. During consideration of FISA in the Judiciary Committee, Senator Durbin and I introduced a bipartisan amendment to address this very problem. The language of our amendment is identical to that offered by Senators Wyden and Udall during consideration of FISA by the Select Committee on Intelligence. The amendment clarifies that Section 702 does not permit the government to search its database of FISA materials to identify communications of a particular United States person. In effect, it would require the government to obtain a warrant before performing such queries involving an American person's communications. The amendment is limited in scope. It excludes from the warrant requirement instances where the government has obtained an emergency authorization, circumstances when the life or physical safety of the American person targeted by the search is in danger and the search is for the purpose of assisting that same person, and instances where the person has consented to the search. Moreover, the warrant requirement would apply only to deliberate searches for Americans' communications and would not prevent the government from reviewing, analyzing, or disseminating any American communications collected under FISA and discovered through other types of analysis. FISA rightly requires that the government obtain a warrant anytime it seeks to conduct direct surveillance on a U.S. person. Indirect surveillance of U.S. persons
by means of backdoor searches should be no different. No one disputes that the government may have a legitimate need to search its FISA database for information about a U.S. person, but there is no legitimate reason why the government ought not first obtain a warrant by articulating and justifying the need for its intrusion on the privacy of U.S. persons. Our constitutional values demand nothing less. Unfortunately, we won't be voting on such an amendment later today. So our reauthorization of FISA will include a grant of authority for the government to perform backdoor searches, seeking information on individual American citizens without a warrant. I believe such searches are inconsistent with fundamental Fourth Amendment principles. For this reason, I cannot support the FISA reauthorization, and I urge my colleagues to oppose the bill in its current form. I'd like next to speak about a few amendments that I think would make some improvements to this legislation nonetheless. I'd like first to speak on the Merkley-Lee Amendment, which would require declassification of significant FISA court opinions. The FISA court is authorized to oversee requests for surveillance both inside and outside of the United States. Given the sensitive nature of these requests, it's necessarily a secret court, a court whose rulings, orders, and other deliberations are and remain classified. Yet, although much of the court's work must properly be kept confidential, it must not operate without meaningful oversight. Beyond the straightforward application of the law to specific and sometimes highly classified circumstances, FISA court rulings may include substantive interpretations of governing legal authorities. As is true in every court called on to construe statutory text, FISA court interpretations and applications are influential in determining the contours of the government's surveillance authorities. Unlike specific sources of information or particular methods of surveillance collection, which are properly classified in many instances, I believe that the FISA court's substantive legal interpretation of statutory authorities should be made public. A hallmark of the rule of law, which is a bedrock principle upon which our nation is founded, Mr. President, is that the requirements of law must be made publicly available for review, or available for the scrutiny of the average American. The Merkley-Lee Amendment establishes a cautious and reasonable process for declassification, consistent with the rule of law. Its procedures are limited in three key respects. First, the pathway for declassification applies only to the most important decisions that include significant construction or interpretation of the law. Second, declassification must proceed in a manner consistent with the protection of national security, intelligence sources and methods, and other properly classified and sensitive information. Third, the process contemplates instances where the Attorney General determines that classification is not possible in a manner that protects national security. In such cases, the process requires only an unclassified summary opinion or a report on the opinions that happen to remain classified. This modest and bipartisan amendment will help ensure that we're governed by the rule of law, that government activities are made by applying legal standards known to the public, and that we remain, in John Adams' famous formulation, a government of laws and not of men. I would like next to speak on the Wyden Amendment to require a report on the privacy impact of FISA surveillance. The FISA Amendments Act of 2008 gave the government broad authority to surveil phone calls and emails of people reasonably believed to be foreigners outside of the United States. Despite the intent that this authority be directed at non-citizens who are located abroad at the moment the surveillance is collected, officials have acknowledged that communications by Americans may be swept up in the government's collection of those same materials. I believe that it's critical for both Congress and the public to have access to information about the impact of these FISA authorities on the privacy of individual Americans. Only with such knowledge can we reasonably assess whether existing privacy protections are sufficient or whether reforms might be needed. Yet senior intelligence officials have declined to provide in a public forum the necessary information to such discussion and such analysis. In particular, it's essential that we learn the extent to which Americans' communications are collected under FISA, whether this includes any wholly domestic communications, and whether government officials subsequently search through those communications and conduct warrantless searches of phone calls and emails related to specific American persons. This modest compromise and this modest common sense amendment requires the Director of National Intelligence to provide this information and report back to Congress regarding the privacy impact of the FISA Amendments Act. Given the sensitive nature of this information, our amendment provides for necessary redactions to protect core national security interests that would be important to our country and help keep us safe. Providing Congress with answers to these critical questions should be a relatively uncontroversial exercise. It should be a no-brainer. Only with such information can we do our job of ensuring a proper balance between intelligence efforts on the one hand and the protection of fundamental individual rights and liberties on the other hand. Finally, Mr. President, I'd like to speak on the Paul Amendment, the Fourth Amendment Preservation and Protection Act. The Fourth Amendment protects the right of the people to be secure in their persons, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. At its core, the Constitution protects our right to be free from unwarranted government intrusion in our affairs absent probable cause, which the government must set forth with specificity to a court in an application for a warrant. It's undisputed that absent exigent circumstances, consent, or a warrant, the government may not intrude upon a person's home and search through his papers and personal effects. But we no longer keep our most sensitive information solely in the form of physical papers, physical documents, and other tangible things. The explosion of data sharing and data storage has made our economy more responsive and more efficient, but it also creates the potential for government abuse. Congress has a fundamental responsibility to protect the individual liberty of Americans by ensuring that the Constitution's core Fourth Amendment protections are not eroded by the operation of changed circumstances, by new techniques that are made possible, in some cases made necessary by new technology. But Congress has failed to do this. Some court rulings have likewise fallen short of protecting the full scope, the full spirit of the Fourth Amendment as applies to our world of complex data sharing. Courts have attempted in good faith to determine whether individuals have a reasonable expectation of privacy in different kinds of information that they might share to third parties, sometimes online. But the result of many of these rulings is a varied and unpredictable legal landscape in which many don't know and can't figure out whether they can rely on the Fourth Amendment to protect sensitive information that they routinely share with others for a limited business purpose. Congress needs to act to preserve the Fourth Amendment's protections as they apply to everyday uses, including routine use of the Internet, use of credit cards, libraries, and banks. Absent such protections, individuals may in time grow wary of sharing information with third parties. I'm cognizant that this area of the law is complex. It's full of changes. It's full of instances in which we have to undertake a very delicate balancing act. Nevertheless, much work remains to be done to ensure that the Fourth Amendment protections are here and that they are real and that they benefit Americans and that they do so in a way that doesn't interfere with legitimate law enforcement and national security activities. We must not shy away from the task simply because it is hard. It is daunting, but it is possible and it is necessary. Congress must act to preserve Americans' constitutional right to be secure in their persons, their papers and effects, and against unreasonable searches and seizures. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I note the absence of a quorum.
Mr. President.
Will the senator suspend his request? The senator from Montana.
Mr. President, thank you. I want to visit about the the FISA Amendments Act, and I want to thank Senator Wyden for his leadership on this issue and for offering an amendment to this act that I have co-sponsored, and I'll speak on it in just a minute. Now, on our vote tomorrow, I will say that I reluctantly plan to oppose the vote on the FISA Amendments bill tomorrow when we get to final passage. There are many reasons for that. I'm not naive. I do understand that there are people out there who want to do harmful things to our nation. I very much appreciate the folks in the intelligence community who do difficult behind-the-scenes work that keep us all safe. But at the same time, I believe that our civil liberties and our right to privacy need to be protected, and I do not believe that they're sufficiently protected under the current law. And so simply extending current law for 5 more years is irresponsible, and it's not a reflection of our values. There are a few ways that this bill falls short, and I'm especially concerned about the practice of reverse targeting. The Deputy Majority Leader talked about it about an hour ago. The intelligence community does not need a warrant to conduct surveillance on someone located overseas, and I think we can all agree that there's no problem there. The problem comes when the Intelligence Committee conducts surveillance on someone overseas where the real purpose is to gain information about someone right here in America. That can happen without a warrant, and we should not let that happen without a warrant. Our national security is not threatened if we require this information to be tagged and sequestered and subject to judicial review. It would merely ensure that the information intercepted overseas in the form of communications to or from an American citizen would have to be overseen by the courts. Current law is supposed to prohibit this practice, but there really is no way to enforce the prohibition. That leaves the door open for abuse, and that is simply unacceptable. Unfortunately, neither Senator Wyden nor I are able to offer our amendments that would address this hole in our privacy rights. We can do better, and we can also do better when it comes to transparency. The simplest amendment that the Senate can approve today is the one that I am proud to co-sponsor. It is the Wyden Amendment to require the Director of National Intelligence to report to Congress on the impact of FISA amendments on the privacy of American citizens, a common-sense amendment. The report could be classified, but would no longer allow the intelligence community to ignore requests for information from Congress. Why in the world would we not require the intelligence community to be accountable to us for its actions? It's our responsibility in Congress to hold the entire executive branch accountable. If we do not ask these questions, we're simply not doing our job. And that's true whether it's President Obama or President Bush or some other president. I hope we can adopt the Wyden Amendment to improve the reporting requirements of the FISA Act. I urge my colleagues to support this common-sense amendment. With that, I yield the floor, Mr. President.
Senator from Indiana.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of H.R. 1 for the purpose of calling up and debating the Coates Amendment, that following remarks of Senator Coates, Senator Alexander be recognized, that the Senate resume consideration of the FISA bill H.R. 5949 after that, and that all provisions of the previous orders remain in effect.
Is there objection? Without objection, the court.
Mr. President, I would like to call up Amendment 339.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 14, H.R. 1, an act making appropriations for the Department of Defense and other departments and agencies of the government for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2011, and for other purposes.
Mr. President, I would like to call up Amendment 3391.
The clerk will report the amendment.
The Senator from Indiana, Mr. Coates, proposes an amendment number 3391.
Mr. President, I'm cognizant of the fact that we will have a series of votes beginning in just 15 minutes, and so even though the unanimous consent request on this amendment is for 30 minutes equally divided, I'm going to try to judiciously use this time between myself and Senator Alexander to explain why we're offering this amendment, and hopefully our colleagues will be persuaded to support us when we vote on this probably tomorrow. We are all, of course, sensitive to the pain and damage inflicted by Mother Nature on the Northeast. In fact, some of the Northeast is getting some more of that pain with the storm up there today. No state or region in our country should be left to fend for itself after a storm as devastating as Hurricane Sandy. And it's important to understand, I think, that many things have overwhelmed the ability of the states and local communities to deal with some of the effects of this. And that is why the Sandy Emergency Supplemental is before us, attached to H.R. 1, and why we will be voting on that, I assume, tomorrow. There are two versions before us. One is the Senate Democrats' emergency supplemental proposal. That totals $60.4 billion. It includes nearly $13 billion in mitigation funding. Now, that goes for the next storm, not this storm. $3.46 billion for Army Corps of Engineers, $500 million of which are projects from previous disasters. $3 billion to repair or replace federal assets that do not fall in the category of emergency need. $56 million for tsunami cleanup on the West Coast, which of course does not relate to Sandy, and a lot of new authorizing language for reform of disaster relief programs, which I would support through the regular process. But without having gone through the authorizing committee, I don't think that's a good idea. Our proposed alternative provides $23.8 billion in funding for the next 3 months. We are not saying that this is the be-all and end-all of what Congress will ultimately fund to meet the needs of those who have been impacted by Sandy. We are simply saying that before rushing to a number which has not been fully scrubbed, fully looked at, with plans haven't been fully developed yet, and that's understandable, we think the most important thing we can do is to provide emergency funding for those in immediate need over the next 3 months. We've carefully worked with FEMA, Director Fugate. We've worked with Secretary Donovan at HUD. We have worked through the Appropriations Committee to identify those specific needs that get to the emergency situations under which this bill is titled. It provides funding for states to allow them to begin to rebuild, but also leaves us time to review what additional funds might be needed. So rather than throwing out a big number and simply saying, let's see what comes in under that number, let's look at the most immediate needs that have to be funded now and provide a sufficient amount of funds in order to do that. In fact, the amount that we're providing would extend in terms of outlays far beyond March 27th. But we want those mayors, we want those governors to be able to begin the planning process of looking how they would go forward. But we also want, in respect to our careful need to carefully look at how we expend taxpayer dollars, we want to allow this 3-month period of time for which the relevant committees here in the United States Senate and the House of Representatives can look at these plans, can document the request, can examine the priorities that might be needed, and then put a sensible plan in place that hopefully will be an efficient and effective use of taxpayer dollars. And therefore, we have struck from the Democrat proposal all monies that would go to mitigation funding, not saying that mitigation funding isn't necessary, but simply saying it doesn't meet the emergency need that this first 3 months proposal addresses. This will give states time to begin to rebuild, but also allow us time to review what additional funds are needed for that rebuilding. We don't allow authorizing language because we don't believe in authorizing something on an emergency appropriations bill that ought to go through the authorizing committees. And we focus specifically on Sandy-related needs. There are a number of other needs, as I've just addressed, that are perhaps legitimate, but ought to come through the regular process. With that, Mr. President, let me turn to my colleague from Tennessee, who has been working with me on this. I will say that our Appropriation Committee Republican staff has gone through this very, very carefully and tried to identify how we can get money for the essential needs to those people, to those communities that need them now, and how we can be responsible in terms of spending the taxpayer dollars by having a period of time in which we can look at the plans for the future and see what additional funds might be needed. With that, I yield to my colleague from Tennessee.
I thank the senator from Indiana. Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Tennessee.
Thanks very much. Mr. President, I'm here to join the senator from Indiana, and I think I can presumptively speak for everybody here. In this body, we want to help the people in New York and New Jersey and other northeastern states who were hurt by Sandy. We've had some pretty tough disasters in Tennessee as well. We had a 1,000-year flood 2 years ago, not 100-year, but 1,000-year. And we knew the federal government wasn't going to make us whole. We had billions of dollars of damage, 52 counties hurt, but we knew the federal government could help, and it did swiftly, and that's what we want to do in this case. With all the talk about the money we're about to appropriate, I think it's important to remind those who live in New York and New Jersey and Connecticut what's already being done with money we've already appropriated. For example, there are 5,460 FEMA personnel in those states. There are 507,000 citizens of those states who have already filed individual assistance applications. This is when your home's gone and you need money for rent or you need money to rebuild. Those applications are in. Already $1.09 billion has been paid to those individuals. There are 25 disaster recovery centers in New York, 24 in New Jersey, 3 in Connecticut. $150 million in disaster loans for the Small Business Administration have already been approved. More than 360,000 applications have been sent in. So, Mr. President, the important thing to know is that help for victims of Hurricane Sandy doesn't depend on what we're about to do here tonight. We already have money in the bank. We already have FEMA people on the ground. There is already help. And in my experience in our Tennessee disasters, that help comes in a matter of days in most cases. So what are we about to do here? As Senator Coates said, and I want to congratulate him for making a very sensible approach toward that. We're about to say, here's $24 billion more for the accounts that are already helping people in the area hurt by Sandy. For example, over $5 billion for the Disaster Relief Fund. That's just to make sure there's enough money to fund those $500,000 requests that are already in. $9.7 billion for flood insurance. If you've got flood insurance, this is the federal government paying its claim. $3.4 billion to repair roads and bridges. There's already money for roads and bridges, already work being done. This is more money between now and March. $2 billion for community development block grants. We found in Tennessee that's especially flexible money, very helpful. That's $2 billion more between now and March. $500 million more for the Small Business Administration. Now, it does not include the proposal that we're offering. It doesn't include items that are not related to Hurricane Sandy. This is supposed to be about Hurricane Sandy. It doesn't make changes to the Stafford Act. What that means is we don't go in this emergency appropriations bill for the next 3 months and say what we need to do is make wholesale changes in the law, make things permanent that are temporary, streamline regulations. They all may be good things to do, but we have a process for major legislative changes. We don't include $13 billion in unspecified future projects. Now, they may be good projects, but if they are, we have a process to consider those progress. The distinguished senator from California and I are the ranking members of the subcommittee that does that. We expect to do that this year. So we're filling up the accounts that are already being used to help many, many people. And finally, if I may say something about process, which I think would be more interesting to the senators than the people of New York and New Jersey, but it's important to know that this bill came to the floor in record time. No one objected to its coming to the floor. It was virtually unanimous before we even started voting on amendments that we invoke cloture. And we'll have a final vote of 51 votes. So the bill, in some form, will pass. And in return for that, those of us on the minority side, so far as I know, got the amendments that we wanted. But I simply want to say to my colleagues that it's still far from a perfect process in our effort to continue to improve the way the Senate works. The bill should have gone to committee to begin with. It did not. It could have been amended there. When it came to the floor on Monday and we said, come right on, no one objects to that, we should have started voting. We could have voted for 3 days on this bill, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, instead of running around trying to see who had amendment. Let's just put them up and vote on them. And then we should have had the cloture vote, which, as I said, was done with only, I think, one dissenting objection. So the process has been better, but not as good as it should be for this Senate. But, Mr. President, Senator Coates' substitute is the right proposal. It's $24 billion more dollars now for the accounts that are already being used to help. And the last thing I would say is this. When there is an emergency, Congress has always acted. We don't always do everything in the first week or second or third week because we already have money in the bank for the needs. But in Katrina, for example, there were 9 different supplemental appropriations bills over time. The next wave of appropriations requests can come to us. We will go to work on them in a few weeks. We can have the work done in the committee, for example, that Senator Feinstein and I work on within a few weeks after that. And if the majority leader will bring the bills to the floor this year, as he did not last year, we can vote on them and we can have the second round of funding. So I thank the Senator Coates from Indiana for his hard work on this. I fully support it. I want the people of New Jersey and New York to know we want to help them, are helping them, and will continue to be interested in the things that need to be done. It won't make them whole, but it will help them get on their feet, just as we have in Tennessee and just as we have in other states across the country after large disasters.
The Senator from Indiana.
Inquire as to how much time is still available before the call of the vote on the FISA legislation.
Approximately 2 minutes.
Well, I'd like to use those 2 minutes, if I could, just to sum up. I want to thank the Senator from Tennessee for his support throughout this whole process. He's been instrumental in helping us work through this to find what we believe is a reasonable way to move forward and provide that immediate emergency help that is so badly needed up in the Northeast. Let me just give one example of how we came to these numbers. We do provide, through the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development appropriations, $32 million for repairs of Amtrak's infrastructure, dewatering of tunnels, electrical systems, overhead wires. These are immediate needs, and we want to provide money for that. Funding for highway emergency relief, directly related to Sandy. We fund for that. We fund for public transportation infrastructure, immediate needs between now and March. And again, we're not saying that there might not be needed more funding after this, but we will at least have had the opportunity to vet that and look to ensure that the money is correctly spent. What we didn't do under that appropriation was $30 million of damages that come under the FAA existing budget, funding for highway projects not related to Sandy that are in the Democrat bill, and mitigation projects unrelated to Sandy. So again, we're not against mitigation, but we're saying let's focus on Sandy. Let's get the emergency help to those that need it now. Let's get it there in an ample amount of time and money for them, and then let's take up through the regular process here how we carefully examine how we spend the taxpayers' money, providing those needed funds for the real emergency, but not using this as a bill to lard up with all kinds of excessive spending that isn't needed for this particular emergency. With that, Mr. President, I yield back time.
Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of H.R. 5949. Under the previous order, there will now be 2 minutes of debate equally divided prior to a vote in relation to amendment number 3437, offered by the Senator from Vermont, Mr. Leahy.
Diane, did you want to speak first, or? Okay. Mr. President.
Mr. Leahy, Senator from Vermont, sorry.
Mr. President, this is a matter I care a great deal about. I'm concerned we're rushing to rubber stamp a House bill It's going to extend the surveillance authorities of the FISA Amendments Act for another 5 years. My amendment would allow the authorities to continue, but would give a lot better and more timely oversight. We passed this is not a last-minute thing. We passed this out in July of the Senate Judiciary Committee. We did it quickly so that we would not be in this last-minute matter. This has no operational impact on the intelligence community, but it does ensure the strongest of oversight. I hope senators will support it, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from California.
Mr. President, I rise to oppose this amendment and indicate the administration opposes the amendment. We have just 4 days to reauthorize this critical intelligence tool before it expires. That's the reason for having the House bill before us today. The House bill is a clean bill. It extends the program to 2017 when it would sunset and be and would need another reauthorization. I believe we must pass this bill now. I believe that 2017 is the appropriate date. It gets the job done. I'm very worried if we do anything else, if we pass any one of these amendments, we will jeopardize the continuation of what is a vital intelligence tool. So, regretfully, I oppose the Leahy amendment.
The question is on the Leahy amendment. Is there a sufficient second? Appears to be there is. Well, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander. Ms. Ayotte. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Begich. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bingaman. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Boxer. Mr. Brown of Massachusetts. Mr. Brown of Ohio. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell.
It's in order, but look at the color. Back to the old
Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Cochran. Ms. Collins. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Coons. Mr. Corker. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Crapo. Mr. DeMint. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Enzi. Mrs. Feinstein. Mr. Franken.
Did you hear him? I don't think you heard. Did you hear Franklin? 9.
Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mrs. Hagan. Mr. Harkin.
It's okay, I'm in town.
Mr. Hatch.
You all were the ones that have traveled, I did.
Mr. Heller. Mr. Hoven. Mrs. Hutchison. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Isaacson. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota. Mr. Kerry. Mr. Kirk. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Cole. Mr. Kyle. Ms. Landrieu. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Leahy.
You tired? They wore you out, huh? That's good.
Mr. Lee. Mr. Levin.
That's great.
Mr. Lieberman.
How far down the road were you?
Mr. Lugar. Mr. Manchin. Mr. McCain. Mrs. McCaskill. Mr. McConnell. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Merkley. Ms. Mikulski. Mr. Moran. Ms. Murkowski. Mrs. Murray. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska. Mr. Nelson of Florida. Mr. Paul. Mr. Portman. Mr. Pryor. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island. Mr. Reed of Nevada. Mr. Risch. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Rockefeller. Mr. Rubio. Mr. Sanders. Mr. Schatz. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Sessions. Mrs. Shaheen. Mr. Shelby. Ms. Snow. Ms. Stabenow. Mr. Tester. Mr. Thune. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Udall of Colorado. Mr. Udall of New Mexico. Mr. Ritter. Mr. Warner. Mr. Webb. Mr. Whitehouse.
Yeah.
Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wyden. Senators voting in the affirmative: Begich, Bingaman, Blumenthal, Cardin, Casey, Coons, Durbin, Franken, Leahy, Lee, Manchin, Merkley, Murray, Nelson of Nebraska, Hall, Reed of Rhode Island, Schatz, Schumer, Stabenow, Tester, Wyden. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, aye. Mr. Webb, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Alexander, Bozeman, Brown of Massachusetts, Burr, Chambliss, Coates, Coburn, Cochran, Crapo, Enzi, Feinstein, Grassley, Hagan, Isaacson, Johans, Carey, Kyle, Lugar, Mikulski, Pryor, Shelby, Vitter, Warner, Whitehouse, Wicker. Mr. McConnell, no. Mr. Barrasso, no. Mr. McCain, no. Mr. Cornyn, no. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, no. Mr. Roberts, no. Mr. Risch, no. Mr. Conrad, aye. Mr. Toomey, no. Ms. Collins, no. Mr. Heller, no. Mr. Nelson of Florida, no. Mr. Portman, no. Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Corker, no. Mr. Graham, no. Ms. Ayotte, no. Mr. Blunt, no. Ms. Cantwell, aye.
Ray Duncan.
Mr. Menendez, aye. Ms. Klobuchar, aye. Mr. Hatch, no. Mrs. Shaheen, aye. Mr. Udall of New Mexico. Mr. Udall of New Mexico, aye. Mr. Akaka. Mr. Akaka, aye. Mr. Levin. Mr. Levin, aye. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, aye. Mr. Lieberman. Mr. Lieberman, no. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Sessions, no. Ms. Snow. No. Ms. Snow, no. Mr. Udall, Colorado. Mr. Udall of Colorado, aye. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Hoven, no. Mr. Rubio. Mr. Rubio, no. Mr. Thune. Mr. Thune, no. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moran, aye. Ms. Landrieu. Ms. Landrieu, no. Mrs. McCaskill. Mrs. McCaskill, no. Mrs. Hutchison. Mrs. Hutchison, no. Mr. Reed of Nevada. Mr. Reed of Nevada, aye. Rockefeller. Mr. Rockefeller, no. Mr. Baucus, aye. Mr. Carper, aye. Mr. Moran, no. Mr. Whitehouse, aye.
Put your glasses on.
Wasn't that the color you had?
Yeah, this is